say so. Oh, there we are.
There we are. Now we are live. All right. Let me begin by welcoming all of the viewers to the first of a new monthly speaker series that Orvis is putting on called Currents. Different guests, different topics in the coming iterations or episodes of the series. But tonight we kick it all off with different styles of dog training and thoughts on dog training. And we have two of my favorite people joining. Oh, I should probably introduce myself, should I? That probably makes sense. My name is Reid Bryant. I'm the endorsed operations manager at the Orvis company, avid wing shooter, avid bird dog person, and by default, the guy who's kind of representing on the first episode of Current. So really glad to be here. More excited to welcome two great guests. First and foremost, Melinda Benbow, also known as Urban Uplander on much of the social platforms. We'll talk about that in a second. And my friend Durrell Smith from the Sporting Life Notebook, and also known for his work on Minority Outdoor Alliance. So with that, how'd I do? So far, so good? Decent introduction?
It's so far so good, man.
All right. Well, people don't want to hear from me. They want to hear from you. So let's begin with Melinda. Melinda, talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, how you got involved with dog training generally, but maybe get into a little bit of specifics about what your interest in dog training is, but really how people might know you already or how people can get to know you a little bit better.
Sure. So like Reid said, I'm Melinda Benbow of Urban Uplander Pet Care here in Indianapolis, Indiana. I run and operate a pet care company, Urban Uplander Pet Care. We provide in-home care, so we go home to care for dogs, cats, reptiles, birds. We let them stay home so they can get the adequate care they need. We also provide boarding for dogs, and we provide basic obedience. And then for our basic obedience clients, we have socialization days, which is your daycare setting, but in a more socialized manner. Jasper. So I got into dog training. It started as basic obedience. I've done the pet care thing for about 7+ years. When we first started, we were fluffy puppy pet sitting off, and our main focus was just pet sitting. But through pet sitting, we realized that we needed more understanding of animal behavior. And so we did that through Jasper. Come on, bud. We have a new 15-week-old pup.
Right? This is all happening in real time.
Exactly. This is the life of dogs. So we knew that we needed more information on dog management, dog behavior. So that set me out on my professional certification of animal behavior. So through that, we started adding the basic obedience. And then about 3-4 years ago, I developed a new passion for upland sporting. And with upland sporting came my new passion for English setters, which, I'm sure everyone in the comments is going to have a couple things to say about that breed, but I thoroughly enjoy him. From there, we also started getting out hunt testing, field trialing, working with positive reinforcement bird dog trainers, traditional trainers alike to achieve well-balanced dogs on and off the field. So that's kind of what we do. That's, the bird dog stuff is relatively new, but we're enjoying it.
So awesome. I love that. And we all sort of know each other, but Durrell, maybe you're coming at us from a whole different part of the country. This is the beauty of virtual interactions these days. Tell us a little bit about you, how you kind of entered into the dog space, what your platforms are, how you're interfacing with gun dog training, bird dog training, I should say, or dog training currently.
So, we are coming down from different spaces, although I did just see you at Seawee.
Indeed.
Just see you there in the South. So I'm coming out of Atlanta, Georgia. Most of my work is done in the Red Hills. That's Thomasville, Albany, Camilla, South Georgia, basically. So I run a gang of nappy-headed dogs, 3 pointers, American pointers, because my dogs weren't born in England, and 2 setters and my lab. And named my kennels the Cheyenne Kennels, named after my mom and her business. And I came into this, I'll say pointing. I'll start at the point of when I got into pointing dogs. I opened up a magazine, a Garden and Gun magazine in a Publix in 2017. I started working with dogs, my lab, in 2016, but pointing dogs came in about 2017 after I saw my mentor, Neil Carter, in a Garden and Gun magazine, and I cold called Sincola Plantation from the Yellow Pages. Take it back on
Yeah, I don't know if people know what Yellow Pages are anymore. It's like you dated
dedication.
Right. I could not find the number of that, and so I went and was like, wait a minute, I'm from the 90s. We had Yellow Pages, and so I went and called Sincola. The number was right there. Mr. Gates Kirkham picked up, answered the phone. He and I are good friends now, and he gave me Neil Carter, my mentor, his cell phone number because he had just retired. And I, along with my wife Ashley, drove down to Thomasville, and he handed me probably one of the wildest dogs that I thought I would ever handle at the time. And from there, it was, a love of bird dogs for that point forward. And I went from 1 dog to 2 dogs to 6 really quick.
There you go, all in, both feet. Well, what's interesting, it's really interesting to me in both of your stories or backstories that you had an appreciation for, love of, passion for dogs prior to entering the gun dog space. And I think for some people, and probably some listeners, the gun dog, sporting dog, hunting dog concept is a little bit confusing, foreign, maybe off-putting. But I guess maybe if you could each, again, just by way of fleshing out your stories a bit, talk about where you started, like going way back to your first kind of interest in dogs, what sparked the flame for you, and then how that progressed to the place you are now and where you see yourselves now. Because I think you've both obviously established kind of a lifelong journey in the dog space. But I'm curious just to hear sort of where you see that going. What has maybe surprised you? Did you think you'd wind up where you are now? Yeah. So maybe Melinda, if you don't mind popping in.
Yeah, I've always been that dog obsessed girl, like in elementary school back when we still had dial-up internet. I spent all my time just on the dog. Remember Dog Fancy, on the Dog Fancy website, learning dog breeds. And I did that my whole childhood. And I never got my first dog until I was 14. And it took a lot of convincing to get that dog. Even my teachers ended up calling my parents, like, all of her papers, her stories, everything is about dogs. You should get this girl a dog. And so when I turned 14, I got my first dog, a black Cocker Spaniel. And, I always knew I wanted to do stuff with dogs. So I had like a plan for this dog at 14. And turns out my dad ended up spoiling her a lot more than I did. So they became really good friends, so it ruined that experience for me. But, after I moved out, I knew still that I wanted to do something with animals. So at that time, we really were only on track to do vet care or maybe dog training. But dog training wasn't really seen as a career goal at that time. So I started my vet tech prerequisites. Ended up having a dog that was epileptic. And as soon as I saw his first seizure, it changed the whole trajectory of what I would do with dogs. I knew right then I didn't want to see them at their worst all the time. My best friend's a vet tech, and just hearing her stories, I know that I made the right choice. And so from there, I worked for my first pet care company, which was an in-home company. We went home to home to care for pets. Loved that. But again, I saw where more dog knowledge for behavior management and training was needed. So started out on my own pet care company. We used to be known as Fluffy Puppy Pet Sitting. Back in the day, we had the FPPS gun dogs page where we would highlight different gun dogs that we just had as clients. I was just really kind of getting into the idea of gun dogs. But I ended up working for a dog training academy here in town and started as an assistant through their training program, worked myself up to a trainer. And from there, I started my full certification through the Canine Catch Academy. So through there, I gained more of the scientific evidence-based knowledge of working with dogs and dog management. And then from there, we did a lot of basic obedience for our local community, helping people work with their dogs, manage their dog's behavior without harming the bond that they have with their dog. And with that, I just, out of nowhere, I think is when I started, I found Durrell on social media. And, I knew, because I have 4 rescue dogs and they're wonderful. Love them to death. I got a pit bull, a chihuahua, a collie mix, another pitty. Just a lot of Heinz 57 dogs over here. And I still wanted more dogs. I love dogs. There's always going to be space in my room for more dogs, but I knew I wanted to do something more with these dogs, right? I wanted to get out and participate in something that brought us together. And so I started taking BOW, which is Becoming an Outdoor Woman. They help you through hunter safety. They teach you how to use guns. They teach you how to hunt safely. And as soon as I picked up a shotgun, I knew that I wanted to do something with that. It felt so fun. I don't want to boast, but I was a natural good shot. And I was like, well, what can I do with this and a dog? And that's exactly when I found Durrell and I saw what he was doing. And what an inspiration. Not only am I seeing somebody out with dogs doing something meaningful immediately. I didn't have a bird dog. I got his workbook. I'm like, I'm going to work through it. I had clients that let me start working with their bird dogs just to get my, experience up before I got a bird dog of my own. And now I'm out getting to hunt test, field trial, get out with my dogs and really do this. So when you say unexpected, I never expected to be heaving my fat butt through a field behind bird dogs, but it's so much fun. So, it's been a long ride, but we have a long way to go. We're still very much novice in the bird dog realm of things, but we're growing, we're learning. And what we really want to do is eventually create an obedience club where we can actually have the property to get out and host hunt tests, host field trials, even host dog shows, agility trials, dock diving. So that's the trajectory we're on.
So that's awesome. I really appreciate that backstory because, again, I think for a lot of folks, it's just interesting to hear that journey because particularly with gun dogs, it can feel like, wow, that's a million miles away, but clearly you've navigated your way to that point. Durrell, you took, as you do, and getting to know you over the last few years, you took a very direct line, not messing around, not deviating from the path. But talk a little bit about your story because yours too. I know you had a background with dogs earlier in your life that were not gun dogs, but then you went all in. And I think it's a wonderful example too for people to hear. Like, hey, if something sparks your passion, how do you really go deep on it and learning big?
Well, the short answer to that is you got two ears and one mouth for a reason. You listen a lot. Okay. And I did a whole lot of that. And as much as I can talk, I actually have to pat myself back for actually listening. But so early on, man, like when I was a kid, like I was scared straight of dogs, actually, crazy enough. Like I was
really,
like very afraid of dogs. I don't know why. I was just about afraid of everything that looked like my shadow, pretty much. And somewhere in my childhood, like I just got really interested. It's like it went from this to this, right? And also in conjunction to that, before my mom passed away, my mom kept me on a horse. Like she kept me horseback riding, which comes in later on. We grew up in the city of Atlanta, like right there. Anybody from here knows about Greenbrier Mall. And I grew up like not far from there. It was a crew of black horsemen, matter of fact, that used to come and set up right across from the gas station here. And I would ride all the time. And I never really understood why my mom kept me in it, but it actually worked out for me later in life because I was proficient at that. Well, so table that. And then as I got older, and I would say college age is when it really, really hit me. I had pit bulls and we were getting pit bulls out of the hood down here. That's what I knew. And that was the culture. That's what you saw. And it wasn't as with anything, there are negative perceptions that get tied to a dog. And Melinda, this, like, and I just didn't see the negativity in a pit. So I was working these dogs and just off the muscle, teaching these dogs how to be performance dogs, how to be obedience dogs, how to be protection dogs. Matter of fact, because I lived with them in the house at the time. And it was just me. Well, my last pit was Lucy Bell, an incredible dog. But what I would later find out was a flaw in genetics. She had a little bit of a screw loose. And so I couldn't keep her and be trying to date my wife at the time, right? Like that just wasn't gonna happen. No, I wasn't gonna trust it. So I rehomed her, and I ended up I said, well, I wanted to get into hunting. And this was right after college. I went to Albany State University. I used to see bird dog stuff down there all the time. If you come to Albany, like it is one of, it's right next to Thomasville, bird dog capital, so on and so forth. And so there's a huge influence there. And I would see it, but I didn't really understand it. Well, after college, I was like, dang, that's really interesting. Like, that's really dope. I had seen, some of my buddies in high school, they went hunting. And actually, funny enough, I have a dog from a friend of mine who I went to high school with, from his dad, matter of fact. But I would see these guys going out hunting, and they would come back with these great stories. And I was like, man, that's really cool. So fast forward, I become a teacher, and I get a little money in my hand. So I finally, after I rehomed Lucy Bell, I ended up going and I said, I'm going to get me a hunting dog. And my mentor, Eric Morris, I was looking for black hunters here. And he actually had a Chesapeake Bay Retriever. And he took that dog and set out some quail for me. And you wouldn't think it. It was the most unlikely thing in the world. That dog hunted and hunted well. And I was hooked from there. So fast forward there, I get my lab. We finally get into wild birds. Again, this is the point where I pretty much dive all in. I asked my wife, I said, well, at the time we were dating, I said, look, I want to do this hunting thing. And she said, make it work. Said, all right, cool. So we go, and I take my first trip up to Kansas, and my buddy and I, Shane, go down to South Georgia, and we get into a mess of birds with a lab. And anybody that knows me knows I cringe at saying this, and his short hair. So, but we got into wild birds, and I was like, dang, that was cool. Like, I want to do it again. And so intro my pointer interest. I go into a Publix, pick up a Garden and Gun magazine just by happenstance, and Neil, my mentor, and Curtis, other mentor, buddy, are right there in that magazine. It was I think it was a June or July issue of 2017. And it was actually called something Afield. But anyway, it was written by Erwin Greenstein. So we move forward, and I'm just like, dang, I want to be like those guys. Like, Neil's got this beautiful pointer stacked up on the back of the tailgate, and I'm like, what's so good, right? And so there goes the cold calling. And so my first interaction with a pointer was Neil handed me a check cord, and there, I pull up to his house. There's 11 dogs out back, and he says, "Go get that dog right there." I do, and that dog comes out like a freight train, man. I mean, just about dang near pulls my arm off, and I was hooked. Couldn't control the dog for anything, but hooked. Right? Neil takes the dog, and the dog just simmers down. See that dog, like he sets out a bird and just kind of walking me through it, and that dog just boom, jam up point. I was hooked from there. So I ended up getting Vegas, my lead dog, and just took my time, man. I just really took my time with that dog. Met along with Neil and the club there that I'm a part of, met a bunch of field trialers, and that was kind of one of the things that shaped my background in addition to wild bird hunting. And so you asked the question, like, I guess, would we have expected to get here, right? Or like,
or no. Did you, that, and or did you land somewhere
unexpected?
Yeah.
You jumped into something unexpected.
Right.
To
answer the question. So I talk too much, and I was talking to my wife too much about what I was learning. And I wanted to record a podcast because at her suggestion, she was like, there are other people that would rather listen to this. Like, this is
cool. Good suggestion, Ashley.
Like, why don't you try this podcast thing? And I was like, all right. And I was already writing a ton about what I was doing, hence the notebook piece of what it is that I do. And I never expected this many people to actually be interested in anything that I had to learn, or anything that I was learning about a dog, right? It wasn't about like the celebratory moment. Sure, it was about like me just sharing that information.
Yeah.
And so it's been a blessing, man. Like, I never would have thought that I would meet a culture or be introduced and welcomed to and sucked into a culture that was so heavily prevalent, not just in the South, but that plays so big a part in the whole American bird dog scene, right? Like we've got a huge hand in that. I never expected that.
That's awesome. I love hearing that. And I also love the idea of people landing somewhere that they didn't expect to land, when you start out on these things. And that leads me, I'm going to go off. I should just share, be full transparency, that I shared a list of questions prior to this that I knew I was immediately going to deviate from. So
I didn't even, you know what, Reid?
You didn't even look at them, did you?
I know you, okay? I was like, he's not going to follow these.
It was an assignment. I had to turn in the questions. But here we go, off piece. Here we go. So here's the question that I want to hear from you all, because I think people listening, particularly people that are maybe haven't had a lot of dogs, haven't had a dog at all, or interested in this, curious about it. That moment that each of you must have had where you realized that you could, and you've both sort of alluded to it in your storytelling, you could communicate with a dog in terms of getting, and this will sound awful, but getting the dog to sort of do what you're expecting them to do. You're teaching them, you're sort of giving a command, the dog is responding. Talk about that moment that you were like, oh, I have the aptitude, I have the understanding, I'm somehow reading things, this is working for me. And also what advice you can give for people that may have not had that experience yet. Because I see it so often that the people will be like, oh, I go to a dog training class and like the trainer, he or she knows something I don't. I can't do that. They have some magic going on, whether it's gun dogs or whether it's just obedience. But talk about that and talk amongst yourself, because I'm sure you've each had different experiences with that as well.
Yeah. So I think when it really clicked for me was when I got my certification. I'd already worked as a dog trainer for a while, right? I was getting dogs to, like you said, do what I want them to do, but when I learned more about the psychology and learning theory and how to manipulate behavior through operant conditioning is when I really saw what I'm communicating to my dogs take off. Now, I think every dog you work with is the next dog's hindsight, right? We learn from each dog. We go through the motions, we adjust along the way, and then the next dog we work with, completely different dog. We have to start over and tap into this dog. But from what I've learned and what I know, there are very easy ways to achieve this. And number one is understanding learning theory and understanding operant conditioning and classical conditioning and how these things play into working with your dog. So it sounds
that first, just so I can make sure I understand. Yeah. So the first term you're using is operant
conditioning. So when we talk about operant conditioning is where positive reinforcement comes from. And a lot of people hear about positive reinforcement, giving your dog reinforcement for doing the correct things. But operant conditioning is broken into 4 quadrants. It's positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. And in science, when we say positive, we don't mean like upbeat and happy, and we mean the addition of something. So adding something to the equation. And when we say negative, we mean removing something. So when I say I'm using positive reinforcement and operant conditioning, I'm saying that I am adding something for reinforcement, and reinforcements to make a behavior more likely to happen. So I'm adding something to make the behavior reoccur. So when your dog sits and you mark that moment, you don't have to use a clicker. You don't have to use clicker training. When your dog does the behavior you want, being able to mark that moment and then reward it is going to make behaviors happen more often. I had my dog walker here earlier with the 15-week-old puppy, and he was jumping for an apple. And I said, don't say anything to him, just wait. And through waiting, he sat. Yes, here's that piece of apple. And then what happened was he went to ask for it again, but he didn't jump this time. And he sat that much faster. Yes, apple. So on the third time, he just sat, because through the repetition and the reinforcement, he's understanding what I'm asking of him without asking it. So like I said, when it really clicked for me was when I got a scientific understanding of learning theory and how to utilize science in my work. So I was able to, get a dog to sit, get a dog to lay down, but how do I get a dog to engage with me? How do I stimulate a dog's mind? How do I understand what is reinforcing and motivating for each dog I'm working with, because learning doesn't happen without motivation. So you really have to understand what things are motivating your dog. And it doesn't have to be a treat. I think a lot of people hear positive reinforcement and they think cookie pusher, I'm bribing my dog to do particular things, right? What I'm doing is I'm rewarding the behavior. There's a thin line between bribe and payment, and I think for the people in these training classes that you mentioned, I think there's just those small nuances that aren't really presented sometimes in those training environments. But yeah, it's, a lot of science-based information. But like Durrell said earlier, it's a culture, so there's so many different ways to work with animals. And what I do is along the lines of what you see maybe in a zoo when somebody works with an orca or works with chimpanzees. It's learning theories across the board, the same for each animal. You just have to figure out what reinforces each animal you're working with.
Yeah, and Durrell, so that may segue nicely into what you're doing a lot more actively now, is working with animals that reward or that drive it's a prey drive, right? Like and that's so hyper bred into those dogs. So what is the work, and you can both weigh in on this, what is the work then that you're doing with a gun dog where, start to finish, when the dog's doesn't even, you have a puppy, Melinda, like doesn't even know that it's like, this is what I'm into.
What do you want? I know I love birds. Well, what do you want? What am I supposed to be doing?
Like, how does that work? Durrell, in your experience, and then Melinda, in your experience, like, what are the manipulations you have to do with that tendency?
So, first of all, I guess that point for me, that point of epiphany or realization was thinking about a rope. It sounds super simple, but you can't push a rope. With the dogs that I'm, working with, I'm looking for drive. I'm looking for range. I'm looking for a lot of things, but a rope, like working with Neil and me figuring out that you're not controlling a dog with a collar. And I love e-collars, all kinds of stuff like that. I use them great. You're controlling a dog with a rope in your hands. And that dog can't be a rope either. Like, you've already got to, and when I say you can't push a rope, like, I can bring you back, right? But I can't work with something that isn't roaring to go already, right? Like, you got to have it in your heart to be a get it done dog anyway, and so when I'm working at that point, I'm looking for a dog that wants to do it for me, right? That's not self-hunting. No, that dog and a lot of that comes from yard working. Well, another point that hit me working with a rope, and I'm always going to do the work that I do with my hands. That dog is not responding to an e-collar. That dog is responding to the thought and memory of your hands and a rope, right?
Repetition.
Right. And every time that I get my dogs out there, like, it hit me that I was doing something right when I stood there and whispered, whoa, and that dog just sit there and start posing for you. Right. And the only thing that was attached to that dog was a rope. It was a check cord. But, I'm under the idea that, like, when these dogs are on point, they're getting a high from that. And I want to play into that.
Yeah.
Right. And I haven't proved anything if I have not done it by the check cord. Keep it simple. Keep it super simple and develop and don't do anything without a foundation. Like, that dog, I want your head forward, but your mind on me, right? You need to be looking for birds. You need to be knowing where I'm at. But I don't want you at my heels. Like, I want you gone. And when you get there, I want to know that dog trusts, number one, me enough that I'm going to give him the reward of the flush. To me, the reward ain't retrieving. I can't stand a pointing dog with a bird in him. I'm sorry. I can't stand that. The reward is the point. You don't think that dog sitting there tensed up like that for minutes on end is not raging with all kind of adrenaline and stuff like that? that dog's tail is going to sit tall for you. If you like a dog with a tail, like I do, that dog's tail is going to sit tall for you because that dog trusts the foundation that you put into it, and you didn't burn them up, right? Love collars, but you didn't burn them up. No, you kept your hands on that dog. You let them know. A soft hand, man.
Yeah.
Make your hands real hard, but you can still have a soft hand for your dog and keep them feeling good.
Mm-hmm.
It's an
Absolutely.
internal. When I see my dogs on point, I know they're pointing for me because they feel good about it.
Yeah.
So that's a great point. And I think one that people probably, again, you've both had a lot of experience, hands-on time on the ground with your dogs, that idea of feeling good, right? Mm-hmm. That I think we all, because we're human, it feels good when I get praised, when I get to eat candy. Yeah. But I guess my question is this, that when you're, how from a mindset, your interpretation of the mindset of a dog, what feels good? Does feeling good mean I get a reward, but I have to do this thing that I don't want to do? Because I think that's one of the sad realities of sort of the way humans are conditioned, is like, I reward myself after I do this thing that I hate, right? Versus, I'm getting a little feedback. There we go. Versus, how do you perceive it? What's going on? Bottom line, what's going through the dog's head?
Yeah.
Like, how do they think different? Because they're not human. How do they think different than humans think? And I realize that there's probably varying degrees of interpretation, or varying interpretations.
I think we have the same interpretation. When I talk with Durrell and I hear like his responses and my responses, I hear the same thing in a different view. So we're both aiming to get the dog to understand what is pleasurable about this. And like Durrell said, is the dog has to want to do this. If you're, and I mean, no shade on my dog Shug, right? My Shug is a Ryman type setter, right? So
we got different setters,
yeah, right. She doesn't, and still considered a field type setter, but she's not a field setter. So her drive and huntability looks different than my 15-week-old dog already. She wants to do the job, but like Durrell said, she may want to do it for herself. She may have other reinforcers in mind when she's out there than what I want her to be doing. So it's a matter of finding what in the field is reinforcing. When I lay a foundation with a dog, yes, I use treats. When we're on the whoa barrel, even if my dog won't take a treat, if he is steady, tail high, I'm tucking a hot dog in his mouth, because what I'm doing is just making that neurological connection between what he's doing and pleasure. That's all it's doing, is I'm marking that pleasure, even while he's in the scent of the bird. I release the bird with the kick basket. He stays still. I'm going to tuck another hot dog in there. Even though that bird is the reinforcer, I'm laying down foundation. When we get to the field, like Durrell said, I'm not using treats. Listen, I don't think a hot dog is going to outweigh my dog on a bird. All right. I'm not crazy. But what we've done before we got in the field is condition what I want you to do. Okay, we've laid the foundation. You know what you need to do. We've reinforced it over and over. We've proved it in different situations, environments, and scenarios. And the bird is what the reinforcer is for the dog that wants to hunt. So like Durrell said, is when a dog is on point, that is a reward. You're in the scent. You are sniffing that scent. You're there. You're on a high. That's rewarding. I do have my dogs retrieve. Just, setters aren't really known to retrieve, but they do. Mine do. So I only shoot the bird if they're steady, right? Because me shooting the bird and letting her go retrieve that is another reward. And if she's busting birds, why would I shoot that bird? That's reinforcing her busting birds. So she has to stay steady. We correct our dogs. If she moves when we're in training, I pick her up, put her back in place, set her back up, make sure she stays there longer, gets that scent. And once she's showing she's being steady, well, then I get to flush the bird. But you're right. Payment is very important. The idea behind positive reinforcement and the pleasure thing is payment, right? We're asking a lot of our dogs, a little less from hunting dogs, I think, because dogs that are bred to do something already want to do the job. It's a lot less of an ask than what you would maybe ask a basic obedience dog, a reactive dog, something like that. But they deserve to get paid for what they're doing, but they really need to enjoy it. There's this is why we don't have Dalmatians in the hunting field and stuff like that. Yeah, you could probably train one, right? But would they enjoy it? Would it be fun for them? Probably not. And it is teamwork. So, for Shug, another thing for correction wise is if she's not out there hunting like a team, she don't get to be out there. It's us together, so we always end on a positive note, but a lot of what we're doing is saying we use check cords, we use ropes, we use kick baskets, we use wheelbarrows, we use pallets. We're doing a lot of the same thing, just again, I feel like we saying the same thing, but in different formats. But I did want to ask, because you said you don't like pointers with birds in their mouth. Are you now using flushing dogs?
Yeah, I use flushing dog. I got a lab that I use for.
Oh, you use Ruger for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this, if you don't mind, this will segue me into the question that Reid asked. I'm old school traditional bird dogs down here in the South. Like, first of all, I don't need my dogs messed up from retrieving because of the handful of field trials that I'll do in a year. Not a lot, but like I got one coming up in a couple of weeks, a black handless trial. Like no dogs retrieved there. But the other thing is I'm just of the mindset that pointers point, retrievers retrieve. Yeah. Let's keep it simple. If I want something to go hunt fur, then I'll just go with that. But and that's mind you, that's not got to be for everybody, but that's just the way that I am.
No, that makes sense. I mean, we haven't field trial yet. It's a goal of ours this year. I think Jasper, our youngest, is going to go for his first, but we've never done it, so I don't know.
Well, my thing is, again, you talk about a reward, right? Like, I don't, especially for that, but even just the way that I like to hunt, I don't ever want that dog's reward to be bigger than the point. Like, a dog
it will never be. It can't be for a hunting dog.
And this is my thing. I'm not willing to jeopardize a dog's style on point. When that dog goes on point and locks up for me, I want that to be the greatest moment of that. I want that dog to feel like this is about to be the greatest moment of my life, and like 50 quail are about to up in front of my face. Like, right? Like, I want that dog to get intent, but I don't want to risk the intensity of a point, and that's what I care about. I don't want to risk the intensity of a point by shooting a bird, and then that dog is anticipating the next thing. So then the retrieve is then the reward. No, that I don't want to get in the way of that. Because for a retriever, the retrieve is the reward. So, for me, we talk about timing, right? A reward is totally timing based.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, I'm a firm believer that, like, retrieve or not, the reward is immediately when that dog hits scent and locks up.
Yeah.
If we're talking about timing, we're talking about in the moment. That's why when you make corrections, you have to do it in the moment. You don't make a correction for a terrible point when the dog retrieves a bird. Like, it's not contextual, but in the moment, that, to me, that dog has hit the jackpot. The moment it slams and nails a bird. Let's think about it also. Think about a young dog that doesn't know to point wild birds yet, right? All they're going to do is run in, and they're going to bust those birds every time, because getting it in its mouth or taking that bird out is the reward. So all we're doing is stripping that urge away from them and just being happy about the scent.
Yeah.
On my brain, you've done all this hard work to find it. That dog should be rewarded in the moment by emphasizing the point.
So what we call that, in dog training is pre-MAC principle. So we're using the series of events as a reward. So you're absolutely right. If you don't want your dogs to retrieve, that point is the reinforcer, So when we do have our dogs retrieve, it's like you said, what we do is we extinguish a behavior first, right? You made the comment before that I can add stuff, I can reel you in, but I can't add to you. You know what I mean? So we have to extinguish these behaviors first before we can add them in. So, and Durrell and I have said this before that, our timelines of training look different because, we're training for different things, different objectives in different ways. And so, it already sounds like a difference between the hunt testing and field trialing that you do scenario,
totally different. Yeah.
And again, I really want to know more about the field trial because I want to try, I have a field setter now, and I think he would be dynamite but I've never done the field trial. So for us with Premack principle, it's the sequence of events that's the reward. So by the time we get to good, steady points, now we never shoot a bird over the dog until they are 100% proofed on their steadiness.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
They have to be steady because, again, that flush is the reward, And then so if I want to add a shoot, again, if my dog jumps or moves, I can't shoot that bird. It has to fly away. You know what I mean? And then for us, what that would do is, my dog still got reinforced by the flush, by the flush. And so then she moved, and we have to set back and kind of do it over again. But the proofing is so important. I think people forget, proof your dogs, extinguish the behaviors you don't want, get the behaviors you do want before moving forward. You know what I mean? To slap myself on the hand, I got my first hunting dog. Durrell hyped me up so much over 3 years. I got the dog, did all, what we thought was the foundation work, right? We worked our butts off. But I knew her recall wasn't proofed the way I needed to be proofed. I knew that she was still lacking in that department. And I still signed her up for a hunt test. Do you already see the issue with this? Mm-hmm. So not only does she look like a mad woman in the field when she's not recalling, you know what I mean? But I'm unconditioning all the work I've already done. Mm-hmm. I'm telling her, oh, well, shit, you can do whatever you want when we're in the field, girlfriend, because I can't correct you in a hunt test scenario. Right. I can't reset you. I can't correct any of these issues you're doing. So what I'm doing is rewarding it because I can't do anything, So proofing behaviors is so important. And again, it sounds like we have kind of, similar.
We're going for the same goal.
Right. Same objectives.
The different path is a little bit different. But
yeah, and like you said, for each dog, the reward is the bird for the hunting dogs. And knowing how to manipulate behavior by using this reinforcer of pigeon, quail, whatever you're training with, is what's going to get you the behaviors you want. But you have to know how that bird reinforces your dog for sure.
Absolutely.
So I want to go with that line of thinking, talking about sporting dogs specifically. But before I do, I want to just echo or say back what I think I'm hearing, which is that there's a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different outcomes that are possible, but it's very important that you know the outcome that you want before you start, because every step along the way is a step towards that. And you have to be able to see what is going to be counter to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. For sure.
And we got two really good questions in the comments, but I want to add to that really quick, Reid, and I would love if we could to tackle those two because it's interesting. But that's where, and I stress people, but if you have access to wild birds, I understand we all use different ones. Like I get it, but if you have access, the best dang thing that's going to proof exactly what we're talking about,
yes,
is your dog's performance on wild birds. Everything that I just had a situation now, Jug, like my Jughead, my big boy, like big hot running dog, all kinds of stuff, thought he was broke. And I mean, steady the wing shot and fall. You shoot that bird, it falls, that dog stands there, looks like a statue. But I didn't proof what happens when a series of wild birds popcorn flush, right? Yes. I was just planning for just the single flush, right? And they're up and they're gone. Well, he lost his marbles watching. He was just like, I can't stand here no more.
I'm having flashbacks. I've had this.
And so, and it's one of those things where it's like, dang, like I didn't. So for me, if you're going to proof anything, you cannot proof against yourself. Yeah. There's nothing that you can do to set up a pin bird scenario. I don't care about your bird launchers, whatever the case may be. There is nothing that a human being can do to proof themselves and their dog work against wild birds. It's not going to happen.
That's experience. That's where that, other 20% come. You can give everyone the 80% of how to do it, right? Mm-hmm. But until you get out in those real life performance situations and you see the things that can happen. Like you said, wild birds is, I think, the pinnacle for everyone, right? Like once you get on wild birds, you really see
what's wrong.
and that's great. You know what I mean? Like even in that hunt test where Shug just, and it was the same scenario. She popped up on all the chuckers from the day before. So like 20 chuckers sitting in the back of the field, busted all of them and just went into a complete frenzy. But, you know, as slightly embarrassing as that may be, they're training moments. They're training moments. All I do is leave the field with, okay, let's add that to the list. Okay. We know we need to go home and do. We got to take notes. We got to see it. And you know what it also does? So the next time I go out in that same location and she gets her title, she looked great that day, you know, and people get to see the adjustments. And I think that's what stops a lot of people is they don't get there as fast as they want to get there. Like you found so much success so fast, right? You figured out how to tap into the dogs in a traditional sense. And there's those average pet owners that want to do the same thing, but kind of differently, right? And it's one of those things where you take those moments and learn from them. They're nothing bad. You know, dogs get bad days too, essentially.
Right.
So we do have some great questions coming in, and I want to attend to some of those. And I think that before we really hit on specifics, I just want to set the stage with a concept or with a conversation, a little bit of a definition from both of you. There's a great comment in the comments here from Jacob. I think it's Poucher.
Yep.
I believe that's how you said. German Shepherds are hands down the best dogs ever, which is awesome. Love that.
You can go to the point, send them my way.
But I think that it's an interesting it tees up this conversation well, that we have a lot of people out there who have sporting dogs or dogs that were bred for an intended purpose, outcome, that don't necessarily do that thing day to day, that don't necessarily have the opportunity, you know, to be really focused on learning a certain skill set or focused on a certain task. So what do we do about that? Is that wrong? Is it bad? Is there a workaround? Is it okay to have a German short-haired pointer that doesn't hunt? And how do you go about giving them what they need to make sure that they're not, I mean, I hate to
no, you're right.
Anthropomorphize, but like make them happy with their sort of breeding genetics.
Absolutely.
So talk to that a little bit before and then we'll dig into these specific comments.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead. You're fine. No, you're fine. Please go ahead.
Sure. Okay. You can take the easy road out and send them off to a trainer or a trialer or whatever case may be, hunt test them and so on and so forth. But I think that is too easy of a solution. You can have a dog that does not, you know, they're not running off horseback, stuff like that every day, day in and day out. And they're not doing this. What I think is it's about getting creative with your environment, right? You've got parks, you've got, you know, forests, you've got public lands, you've got all of these things that are available. I do think it takes a little bit of willpower, you know, to say, I'm going to get this dog together despite my living circumstances. I think there is an exorbitant amount, like a short hair, for example. I think there is an exorbitant amount of obedience training that is needed, or you're going to have a tore up couch, you know, but also showing that dog a bird. A dog pointing is better than a dog not pointing, right? Like, it's not going to build the greatest habits in the world for a dog if you're having them sight point and stuff like that. But I mean, dude,
something.
Delmar Smith, like in his book with Bill Tarrant, you know, How to Train Your Gun Dog, he talks about a dude that raised a bird dog in New York City in Central Park.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Once you get on Craigslist and find yourself a pigeon breeder, honestly, that'll make you a really good pigeon, you know, maintenance or whatever, because I know a lot of guys that live in the city that raise pigeons right outside of their windows, right? And you can do that. They'll home for you. You know, they'll come back. It might not be a quail, it might not be a chucker, but it's something that you can plant. You know, you'll get back. And you take that dog out, you become you get really good at animal husbandry, but then you take that bird out, teach them to home back. That's 6 weeks of your time that you can teach that bird to start coming back, you know, at whatever distance that you want. It might take a couple of days, but at least you got there. Once you got that bird homing, take them out to a park, take them out to your backyard, take them out wherever there is green space and thick enough cover. Green space and thick enough cover to get bird work in. You may have to get, spend a couple of extra dollars and get a launcher, right? I understand not everybody's circumstances are different, but if you want a bird dog, make a bird dog.
I agree.
Melinda,
I
what do you
agree.
think?
So when I got Jasper, I live in the city. Urban Uplander is literally, we are urban Uplander. We are training in the middle of Indianapolis. We have in this, metro area I live in, about 6 shutdown churches that have giant fields. And that's where we do a majority of our training. We're fortunate enough to have a bird dog club 40 minutes away. So we do a lot of our other stuff, hunting wise there. But we have to make it do what it do, it's for the dogs. You know what I mean? You can't get complacent, and for everything we do, there's going to be 100 excuses why not to, right? Life is busy, but to your question, I think the thought comes in before we get a dog, right? What kind of dog are we getting? I actually just wrote a blog for Orvis about this. What kind of dog are we getting? What was it bred to do? All dogs were originally bred to do a specific job. Understanding what that job is going to help you facilitate those hardwired behaviors, because that's where people get the cattle dogs, and now we're herding kids, and we get the security dogs that are keeping our guests out the door, and we get the terriers that are ripping up our couches and getting into places we don't want them. So understanding what your dog was bred to do is going to help you, number one, sign up for a sport that they can do. AKC, UKC, IBCA, and everything else has hundreds of dog sports out there that are also offered to like mixed breed dogs too. You don't have to have a purebred dog, because when you have a mixed breed dog, it's still a mixture of dogs that were bred to do something. So it's still going to have some kind of hardwired instinct to do a job. So I would say, if no matter what kind of dog you have, if you don't want to get out and knock down birds every hunting season, that's fine. Hunt test, field trial. If your dog isn't keen on birds, scent work, scent detection, barn hunt. There's so many different things you can do with your dog. But understanding what your dog was bred to do, I think number one is most important. I think especially if you get a dog, I have a field dog in the middle of the city, but my mentor that sold me that dog knows that I'm going to hunt that dog. And I don't think any ethical hunting line breeder would sell to a family that just wants this as a pet. You have to get out with these dogs. It's a constant effort. And, again, it starts before you get the dog. You got to plan to make that time. And if you know you don't have it, I wouldn't do it. Or I would wait till I have the time,
Yeah. No, I think
I'm sorry, but to Durrell's point, I think you made a wonderful point of finding enrichment where you can, right? If you can't travel to do dog sports, there are still ways that you can simulate ways that your dog can interact, forage, sniff, have those sensory enrichments without actually having to go out and do these things. But you have to keep your dog enriched and stimulated.
Yeah. And I think to take it just really quickly to put a kind of a punctuation mark on that is to say that I think that if you don't exercise some of those highly, highly, highly developed genetic traits, you're going to see
those problems
in other places. Getting short on time, and I our friend Julia, who's behind the scenes with her little shepherd's crook, is bringing me in. And but we have some questions I want to attend to. So first and foremost, Rob Cote or Cody, I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Says, you folks are terrific. Love that. Thank you. Curious on your thoughts about using training English versus field type labs for upland bird hunting.
That's
all Durrell. That's all Durrell.
So, yeah. All right. And this was my experience. I would say let me preface this by saying I'm more point and dog than I am lab, or retriever, but there is a difference between the two. I would, first of all, be a little more specific and saying not English versus field, because English culture makes field dog. Actually, that's where we got our dogs from. But for upland bird hunting, if you're okay with a flushing dog, I think a lab is great. If you're talking about a more British style, you're talking about dogs like Mike Stewart's Wild Rose dogs and things like that. Those dogs are not going to pack a punch like an American lab is, right? They're not bred for that. They are going to be incredibly mannerable dogs, little bit lower energy on the totem pole. I hope my buddy Douglas doesn't get on me about this, but as far as energy wise, a little bit lower on the totem pole. They're going to be great for upland retrieving. They're going to course and quarter and do all of that stuff right in front of you. When you're talking about an American lab, you're talking about a dog that's a little bit bigger, a little bit leggier, and I mean, they got to go, right? Like bigger, better, faster. That's what us here in America do. At least we think we do. And so,
well, in terms of hunting dogs, I think you're right. I think that our American dogs, we've really put an extra drive into. From the English labs that I've seen, you know, they're definitely more of your retrieving dogs. And when I say retrieving, I mean like the tennis ball. Like in the backyard, they'll go. So that's what I would see them doing.
I think you're going to have that. You're talking about different temperamental levels. I would not be concerned about. First of all, my first concern is, am I buying a showbred lab or a fieldbred lab? That would be my first concern.
And English would be show. So it would be like having
but see, we've got field dogs that are from England. They are bred in England. And when I say English, I mean like literally come over there, and they're incredible dogs. I'm using Wild Rose as an example. English is a lineage.
I think, Rob, if you want to add in the comments, you know, if you have like a field English or a show English, you know, because when I hear English versus field, I think of like the same thing for setters. Like, do I have a bench setter going into the field or a field setter going into the field? You know, it looks a lot different.
Yeah, and I think there is a bit of a semantics issue with the English lab deal, and it's almost like a semantics problem. I guess the one thing that I would say, and I hope I'm not monopolizing here, but I just have an opinion on this one a little bit, is that to the point that you both have been making, is that, you know, American labs for the field have been bred to do a specific thing. Like American field trials for labs are very different than English field trials. So you have two different criteria by which those bloodlines have been developed. So, you know, a 300-yard blind retrieve for an American lab in a field trial is going to require a certain dog. Basically a day of hunting close quarters, hares, rabbits, whatever kind of squirts out of the hedgerow is a very different dog, which is how they're doing field trials in the UK. So I think it is a bit of a semantics issue, but yeah, Rob, definitely if you want to weigh in some more, we can get a little more specific. I want to jump next to Jacob Ian Beers, who says, have either of you worked with Cocker Spaniels? I have a 7-month-old Finley. That's a great name. That I'm training for next season. Any basic tips for starting flushers?
You want that, Melinda, or I got it?
Well, I think, again, you know, we always talk about semantics when it comes to breeds. You know, I think I always start with, when I hear Cocker Spaniel, Setter, Lab, what kind? You know, I'm guessing a field Cocker Spaniel is what I would assume. So, but honestly, Durrell, I think I've never worked with flushers, so I don't want to give any false advice here.
So with Cockers, and you know, that's a thing down here in Georgia. I actually want a Cocker. After my lab, I'll end up probably having a Cocker. But I wouldn't start a Cocker any different than I would start my own lab. All right. You're talking about a flushing dog. You want a dog that's going to do the job. American field Cocker, great. So you've got a dog with some motor in it. Okay, cool. Anytime somebody says American, I just think motor, first of all. Like, that's just where I go to. But as far as starting that dog, honestly, I would do the opposite of what I want for pointers. Okay, polar opposite. I would take some Bob White quail, not anything big. Don't take a chucker. Don't take a pheasant. Don't take anything that might buck back on that dog. Don't take a pigeon. Take a quail, a 6-7-month-old Cocker puppy. Pull a couple of the flight feathers out, enough for it to get up off the ground and hit it again, but not enough to fly away.
Yeah.
Pull a couple of those flight feathers off of it. Put that bird in some pretty thick brush, right? We're talking about a flushing dog. You want a dog that's going to get in there and work that dog around that brush. And as long as that dog is built right, those Cocker Spaniels should turn on at that scent. Sometimes you'll have to get them to sight, go after it by sight a little bit.
Yeah.
But a dog that young, I want you like nuts about getting a bird in your mouth. I want you nuts about getting birds up, right? I don't even care if they fly away. If you catch them, great, like awesome. But for a 7-month-old pup,
you want to build drive. You want to start.
You're just building drive. Obedience, of course. You're doing your obedience work. But as far as getting birds in the air, you want a dog that is nuts, and it needs to be successful. Because the other thing is, a dog, a flushing dog or a retrieving dog that don't get no birds in the mouth is a dog that's going to quit on you.
Frustrated. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I haven't worked with flushers, but to Durrell's point, if you are putting that bird in thick coverage and you're not seeing that drive, you're not seeing that tenacity, set your dog up for success. Go ahead and adjust yourself. It may just be too much brush. Lighten the brush a little bit. If you have to keep backing up to, what? Here's the bird, build that drive, but work with your dog, just move at their pace. So again, if he's not getting intense with that big brush, put it in a little lighter brush, but you want to build that drive for those pups at that age.
And also learn your wind direction. Like learn that, because a lot of people think a lack of intensity is, the dog doesn't have it. Well, no, maybe the dog just doesn't smell it.
Exactly.
So you're talking about, with all of these dogs, pointing or flushing dogs, we're trying our best to put these dogs in the most successful situations that they possibly can be. That takes a little bit of extra effort on you to understand wind direction and scent cones and things like that. You got a flushing dog, put that dog to where that put him downwind where that scent is smacking him in the face, and he's going to hit it hard and run deep into it.
Yeah. Be aware of how you're approaching that bird, what direction you're approaching from. And it's wind direction. So I still have to go out in the field and toss up some grass when I get out there. It's hard, but when you figure it out, someday maybe I will. It's so beneficial. Oh my gosh.
I think one thing that you both said, and I think it's worth just highlighting before we move on to the next question, is that idea of prey drive with a field dog, a dog that's bred for hunting. Basically, developing that drive is the element against which you're training, because that's the ultimate reward. And I know we talked about pointing versus flushing versus where, but the ultimate reward is, again, you have generation upon generation upon generation of breeding that should have imparted this desire for that bird into the dog. So then everything you do to kind of reward, to sort of train against or whatever is structured around that prey drive. So I think just to kind of put it in context like that, I'm gonna play like HR guy for a second, or PR guy, I should say. For there's a good question from Jennifer. Jennifer, I'm sorry, I'm gonna probably butcher your last name, but I'm gonna try to pronounce it anyway. It's Jalagi.
Yeah.
You did that way better than I was going to.
I try. But who knows if I did okay. But the question is about GSPs, and it's an interesting question. Jennifer says for Durrell, I cringe. I know you don't. You don't seem to like GSPs. I think it's probably not that Durrell doesn't like GSPs.
I don't.
It's that Durrell has a preference. So I think the question becomes sort of preferences. So maybe we talk a little bit about breed preferences and what leads you to choosing the breeds you do. So if you can sort of reference this question, but using that as the context for the answer.
Okay.
And I'll direct any angry GSP owners to me. I'll deal with it.
All means, please send angry texts to me or emails to me, please do. So I will start this off only because the question was directed at me, and then Melinda. I'm actually really curious as to why you got them old rhyming setters, because we ain't got the same kind of setters. So my thing with GSPs, I've got a number of buddies, from my buddy Shane Drake and Philip Maley, who've got really good GSPs. Okay. It's me giving GSP guys a hard time because they give us pointer guys a hard time. It's like it's mutual, right? But in truth, I don't like a dog that drops his head when he finds birds. I don't like that. I want our dogs, American pointers, setters, we were breeding for, again, motor, right? Well, a dog ain't running if his nose is on the ground. I like a running dog.
Okay.
I don't want the German culture, like German breeders back in the day when we're talking about Deutsch Kurzhaars and things like that. Those dogs were versatile, what we call versatile dogs. I think they call it HPR over there, Hunt Point Retriever.
Hunt Point Retriever, yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't want a dog to do all of that. If I did, then I'd get a short hair, honestly, or get a wire hair, or probably a poodle pointer, right? I don't like the idea, number one, that a dog will drop its head to find birds. That's not how I find birds here in the Piney Woods. I need a dog's head, nose up in the air, wind scenting. You see a lot of videos and photos of a pointer or a setter, nose high in the air. That's why we like that high head, high tail. And you'll see him opening his mouth every so often. That dog is
catching that scent, yeah.
That dog is sucking all that scent in. He's not doing that on the ground. And my birds aren't running. You know, now I want a dog smart enough to know when to put his nose on the ground, right? That's different. When you get too close to that covey, maybe because half them birds are running anyway, okay? The whole covey ain't flushed. Half those birds are running, especially down here in the Piney Woods. So you are going to sit here, and I need you to know where the push and pull is. That's how you get a dog smart enough to relocate. Okay. Now, why do I pick the dogs that I have? With the exception of my lab, who I started with, I'm a pointer guy. I'm hardcore pointer guy. Setters are right behind that for me. And I get big running, hot running pointers because I like the style. You know, that's the arrogance of me. I also like the intensity. It's like driving a Porsche for me, you know, but also I like a dog that I don't need a jack of all trades. I need a master of one. Okay. All I need you to do is master pointing. That's all I care about. Right. We all want to hunt. I shoot with a 410. So let's not act like I'm even shooting that many birds. All right. And I shoot with a 410 to emphasize the art of what it is that I'm doing. Right. I want it, man. It ain't nothing better when one of my setters, Rose, just goes up, boop, flags on point. And that tail in the wind is blowing, blowing all kinds of stuff like that. I also am a big traditionalist down here in the South and in Georgia. That's what we run. That's what I was raised on. But I don't want a dog to get distracted by fur, when I'm looking for feathers. My pointers don't care about rabbits. My setters don't care about rabbits. They don't care about deer. And if they do, I nick them one time with an e-collar and we just kind of move on. No big deal. But the long and short of it is, it's based off of tradition. I like a dog with a tail because of the style. And I want my dog's nose in the air. I don't want it on the ground. And I like a white dog too. I like a dog look like a ghost running through the woods.
He likes the white dogs. I think it's funny. I love this question because the more you get into the field environment, you see the breed bias a lot, and it's not like a negative bias, right? Like it's just an ongoing joke, honestly.
Yeah.
Like anywhere you show up with an English setter, the girl with the English setters, this girl, show up with a GSP, show up with a Vizsla, like you're gonna get the people that are gonna, oh my gosh,
right?
It's funny. My first hunt test I ever went to, I went without a dog because I wanted to meet the breeds. I want to decide what breed I want. And you see like the pointer guys pull up and stake their dogs out, the rough guys, like. The German short hair people kind of come up with like their kennels, the Vizsla people show up in RVs with like heated beds with these dogs. Right. Like you see the culture behind each breed and who owns these breeds. It's tradition. And I think ultimately, I know that we keep eating our time, but if I can say anything about everything we've talked about, is tradition. I think it all comes back to tradition, breeds, training methods, etc. Even though I am a positive reinforcement trainer, I want to specifically say that doesn't mean I'm only using positive reinforcement. It's just a connotation that's been, added to positive reinforcement trainers. It's not solely positive. We correct our dogs. We do everything you guys are doing besides an e-collar. And I know plenty of positive reinforcement trainers that use e-collars, Standing Stone kennels, Willow Creek kennels, etc. And I understand the purpose of it, right?
Right.
Just doesn't mean, because I don't use something doesn't mean I'm against it. But I love the culture of upland hunting. I think it's so neat that you get to work with Neil and everyone, you get to work with the people that are rooted in this. You know what I mean? Like I kind of see myself as like, not the outsider, but somebody coming in who really, wants to join the community. And I think there's a place for me. I think there's a place for anyone who wants to be a part of this, right? But it's an amazing tradition. I wish I grew up with people that did this my whole life. Like, I think if I could have been doing this the past 33 years, how dope would that have been? Like,
right. And I mean, and see, that's where, the guys that brought me in are coming. You talking about 50 years for Neil, and his granddaddy taught him, right? We're talking about over 100 plus odd years.
Absolutely.
Of that. And so, for me.
And you guys have figured out the science to it without knowing the science to it.
Yeah,
we're saying the same thing. It's just it's interesting.
Yeah, like all the different stuff that you were talking about earlier, and the states of mind, and all the fancy big words that I can probably write better about and I can't spell. We're looking for the same thing. You've just applied a science to it, right? And there's a certain point to which we have to understand what we're looking for. And like we're talking, we got setters, right? We both got setters. You got Ryman type setters. I
have one Ryman, and like you said, she was my first. I think we all do this with our first dog. Now, I want everyone in the comments to understand, everything's hindsight with the next dog, right? It's a journey. When I first started doing it, I got the field dog and I'm like, oh, I need a horse. And I live in an urban, it's a journey, and every dog you work with, you learn something new. Will I get another Ryman type? Absolutely not. Yeah. I love Shug to death, but the field dogs are field dogs.
Yeah. Like, and see, that's the difference. Like your setter versus what I'm running. Like Joker right now is like 5 or 6 months old, and he is just programmed to go, right? Oh, yeah. That doesn't work for everyone, right? Everybody talks about a setter with an off switch. Mine ain't got no off switches. Rose does. I mean, she's cool, but when they hit the field, it's time to go. And I also have kennel dogs. So that also makes a difference. Yeah. But you have to understand the various nuances, and this is what makes people bird dog nerds, right? Like the various nuances within the breed. Like I don't have Llewellyn setters, I don't have Ryman setters, I just got regular setters.
Field setters, yeah.
They're just that. And I can tell you about the pedigrees, and they come from Grouse Ridge this and Shadow Oak Bow that and blah 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 blah. But I got dogs that were bred to do a certain task, right?
That's important.
And it also depends on who you are as a trainer. I'm the crazy dude that I guide wild bird hunts. Like I like for my dogs to get lost, honestly, because it's funny to me. Because I know,
and you also know that they're going to be on point by the time you get to them, and that's the most important. If we can tell anyone anything about what we're doing, you got to have a steady dog. All right,
you got to have a steady dog, right?
No matter what you're doing, steadiness is key. But Jasper, but you're right, Ryman, versus my field setter, already at 15 months, totally different dogs. But like you said, the nuance, right? I know you're an art teacher, so what I see, what I do as is art, and just like you do, right? So I can take a canvas and I can throw a whole bunch of paint on there, right? And I can slap something on it and call it art. But if I understand color theory and I understand complementary colors and how colors mix and elevate each other, and I understand cross hatching and stippling and paint strokes, I can make something even better, So that's kind of what we see dog training as is, you teach the alphabet, then you teach how to make a sentence, you add the punctuation, and you keep going. You know what I mean? It's, you're always shaping these dogs. So, I think a lot of people get to the point where like, I can't get my dog to do it. And it's just, you keep going, you keep pushing, you adjust and you keep going.
Right. I think we're getting a little short on time, but I want to make sure we hit on one other question. Sorry, I'm just looking at the questions here. But I did want to make the point too that just from my perspective, for whatever that's worth, is that some of it too is just it's like what do you want to do with this dog, and what's pretty to you? What's like you want to sort of look and feel a certain way. You want your experience to be a certain way. And the fact of the matter is that for many, many people, myself included, in essence, I'm in this industry professionally, but I spend a heck of a lot more time with my dogs not hunting than I do hunting. And so it's like, I have the breed that I have because I like how they look and I like what they do. And I can pick them up and throw them over a fence if I have to, whatever. And so it's just sort of, I think for everybody, it's okay to have different goals, desires, intended outcomes, aesthetic.
Yeah. And your dogs should match those, right? And it's no hate to any Ryman type owners or anything like that. But when you get a dog, you want your dog to be able to do the job you want it to do, right? With Shug, she does the job. She does the job great. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't bust my ass to get her where she's at, and with the help of my mentor, Dr. Dale, he spent a lot of time helping me with her, but it was a long road. And I mean, a part of that's due to the fact she was my first bird dog, right? We can't deny the fact that this is a journey. Nothing happens like that and perfectly. But, I went with the field setter this time around because I know what I want my dogs to do. And I want my dog to love doing it. And I want my dog to love doing it with me. And I have a very engaged field dog for that now. So I'm excited for this second journey with him.
Yeah, I love it. We're going to do answer one more question. I'm actually going to sort of squash two questions together. One from my friend Caitlin, who said, what advice do you have for starting adult dogs versus puppies in the field? But that's actually a nice precursor to Perry Taylor's question, which is, I have an English pointer. He was originally trained as a horseback field trial dog and ranges to about 100 yards. Do you have any tips on shortening up to about 20 yards? So what often happens, and I think this is not an uncommon, and in fact, in many ways, it's a wonderful thing, is that dogs that maybe were rehomed or, were trained to do X, but then didn't necessarily make the grade. So became, went from a professional guide string and came into the home and maybe sort of all of a sudden change the level of expectation or the desired outcome for that dog changes. Or you have a dog that you maybe rescued or maybe adopted who's an English pointer who's 5 years old, and you want to see, hey, can I get this dog to actually learn how to do some of the field stuff when they didn't have that initial sort of imprinting early on? What are your thoughts? What are the tips and tricks? What do you think about specifically Perry's question, but maybe how it translates to other ways you can integrate a later stage dog into can you teach an old dog new tricks? There we go. I should have said that from the get-go.
I think it's what Durrell and I are saying about steadiness, right? 100-yard range is a lot when you don't have a horse. But for my fat butt, heck yeah. Like,
I don't want a dog within 100 yards, but go ahead.
Well, here's the thing, right? If you have the steady point, it doesn't matter either way. Your dog could be 200 yards away, but they have to be steady on point. So whatever you're doing, I wouldn't worry so much about the distance the dog is ranging, but I would worry about when it ranges and it gets to that bird, what is it doing? Is it staying steady? Is it creeping? Is it busting? And then again, when you have a new dog, you gotta generalize the knowledge they have, right? Because dog training is generalized. Whatever somebody else taught your dog, you still have to be able to do with that dog. So it's going to take some foundation laying, even though the foundation may be there from another trainer or another person. But I would say, you just need to make sure that dog's steady so you can catch up to that dog and actually get the bird once you get there. But it's hard when you adopt dogs and you don't know what they've been through and the training they've had, and like Reid said, the imprinting that happened at an early stage, because it's very important that the proper imprinting happens at the proper time. So I don't think it can't be done. When I first started working with dogs, I fortunately had a gentleman who fosters short hairs through the Ohio Short Hair Rescue. And that's what I started on, was just rescue short hairs. And I'll say it's all about adjusting with these dogs, see where they're at and adjust with them, because again, you don't know what's happened to them, what training has been done, what damage has been done. Because some of these dogs that end up in shelters have just been lit up and thrown aside. So
fingerprints on them.
Exactly. So this is where taking it slow and honestly, positive reinforcement is beneficial. Reinforcing those things you like and trying to extinguish the things you don't like. And the more you're able to reinforce the proper behaviors, the more likely you're going to see those things. But again, I don't mind dogs ranging. Jasper, my Ryman range is so far out, but I think another big thing is creating engagement. One thing I didn't do with Shug, and one thing I made really important for Jasper, was creating engagement in the field. I want that dog to check in with me. I want that dog to, like Durrell said, yeah, you're on point, but your focus is also on me. You need to know what I'm doing. So creating some good engagement in the field, I think, is a good start too.
So yes, absolutely. And I'm probably going to give the advice that no one that is foot hunting wants to hear. Because you talk about a dude. I like my dogs. I've got a range of dogs. Vegas is about a 250 yard dog. Jug is about a 4 or 5, maybe 600 yard dog average, right? Like they're two different kinds of ranges. So to the first question, can you teach an old dog new tricks? Yes, but it's going to take a little longer. As long as you don't have too many fingerprints on that dog. If that dog has been burned up, I'm sorry, just don't spend your energy there. The dog needs to be your house dog. You need to go ahead and go about your business. But if he's just an old dog that needs to be rehomed, a good buddy of mine, Ben Daves, he got a heck of a dog. Just a little bit older, but the dog is dead broke. Like, oh my God, it looks really good. Can you get an older dog that has not learned to hunt to do it? Well, yes. If the drive is there, you absolutely can, but you're going to spend a whole lot more time trying to get that dog there. I used to have a dog like that she was she just literally sat in the kennel. And I bought her off of a buddy of mine thinking that she would work out. And she knew 2 point, but by 2, she didn't care.
Yeah.
And I could get her to point here and there, but it wasn't a big deal. Now, so you can get a young dog. If you don't really have a lot of experience, try your hand at a younger dog. That's the safest thing to say. Because I'm sorry, you're not gonna hunt a bird dog that you don't like. You just not. Okay, it's like getting close to one like. Now, with Perry's question, you got a dog, a pointer that was originally trained as a horseback field trial dog, ranges about 100 yards. You want to shorten them up to 20 yards. Very simple advice. Let that dog still run at 100 yards. Pray that he runs bigger because he's a pointer. And please do not shorten that dog up at 20 yards, because if you hunting the right kind of birds, and I'm not talking about karate chopping, drop kicking birds, like I'm talking about like real birds, please don't shorten that dog up to 20 yards.
20 yards is pretty short.
You don't need a dog at that point. You just don't. 100 yards, okay, I get it. I can work with that. 100-yard English pointer that used to be a horseback dog was a dog that he just wasn't fit for that venue, which is fine. I see that all the time, that they're not washouts. That dog is just inclined to not roll that far. I got one dog that probably won't run much bigger than 250 Vegas, and that's cool. And I let him roll. And I got a dog that ain't scared to get out there, but it'll be locked up jam on point, even if he's 600 yards out there. At that point, you're worried about the birds flushing versus a dog holding point. But for Perry, and he says he's 5 and otherwise a bird finding machine, please let that dog be a bird finding machine and do not shorten that dog up.
Sounds good to
Sounds
me.
like he's doing good.
Yeah, it sounds great to me. And
I
I
wouldn't
think
change a thing.
particularly,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, particularly if to your earlier point, Melinda, like if you're getting good reps in and getting good consistency on him staying steady and not busting birds.
Yeah, I was just gauging what 100 yards would be, and yeah, it's not that far.
You can get to 100 yards, and
Yeah.
you can get 100. I mean, I wouldn't honestly, anything under that.
You got a bootlicker.
Bird dog, like,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I mean, that's just my opinion. I know guys that want dogs to hunt closer, but
I also think that, with the new, old dogs, new tricks is the fact that if you are going out to get a dog for the purpose of hunting, I do think you should get a puppy. I think you should go to a reputable breeder that has proved hunting dogs and get you a hunting dog. This is from experience.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, older dogs are great. And yes, like Durrell said, you can teach them. It's going to take longer. But again, I think you may just be looking at wanting to facilitate those hardwired behaviors like we were talking about earlier. And that's where you can kind of find sporting clubs to help you. And if it's simply just to get the dog out enjoying an activity, then I think that's great. But it is very hard to work with these older dogs, especially not knowing who's put hands on them and how they put hands on them. So.
Absolutely.
I think in the interest of time, sadly, we should start to rein it in. But it is sort of sad because there's this. You obviously are both so passionate. There's so much to learn, so much to talk about, so many questions rolling in. We got to do this again.
Absolutely.
Before we sign off, Durrell, I'm going to tell people how they can either get in touch with you if you want them to get in touch with you, or just see the work you're doing, follow you on social platforms. Share it all.
Yeah. Please do. I always take questions. So got a couple of different platforms. My main major, my baby is the Sporting Life Notebook. So you can just type in at the Sporting Life Notebook. My nonprofit, who I founded with my wife, is at Minority Outdoor Alliance. You can check out some of the work we're doing there. Please visit all the Orvis platforms, the Orvis Hunting and Shooting blog. Reid has been so kind. Reid and Phil Monahan have been so kind to have me and some of my crazy writing on. So you can check some of the stuff out there. We actually did a dog training piece recently. And as an artist, it's just DLAMAR_22. So DLamar_22.
And those are popping up. It looks like Julie's putting those in the comments too. So if you want to see links, they're in the comments.
It.
She is.
Well, cool. You can find me on Instagram, urban.uplander, for my pet care company. You can see on our story our daily dogs that we work with. And then we tend to post, what we're doing with our setters and stuff on our feed. We do have our setter Instagram, which is urban.uplander.setters. You can also find us on Facebook just by looking up Urban Uplander. You can always go to our website to check out our blog. We recently started a podcast that's starting to get going. And then other than that, you can see our future breeding program on there and other stuff. We are getting into majority of where we kind of get to expose our knowledge is through Orvis. So if you check out our Orvis blog, you can look at my link tree, which has different stuff from how to potty train with using a crate, top tips for dog training, and a whole bunch more stuff there on the Orvis page. And we do have a whole bunch more Orvis productions coming up this year.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for your time, for your expertise, your insights, your thoughts. Love doing this again. Yeah. We got to do this again. We'll tell our friend behind the scenes, Julia, that we have to do this again. And thank you all for joining in, asking questions, listening. As always, just really appreciate folks taking the time and getting to know us a little bit better and giving us the opportunity to get to know you all a little bit better. So
it was so fun.
Enjoy those dogs, enjoy learning about them, enjoy training them, enjoy spending time with them. And thank you, Durrell and Melinda. You guys are the best.
Thank you. Good to talk with you guys.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Melinda.
Thanks, guys.
Dope, man. Thank y'all.
Awesome.